covering the stories that impact your life, your town, your state, and your future. This is The Means Report with your host, Brad Means.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome to The Means Report. So glad that you are spending part of your day with us, and we assure you it is going to be an informative half hour as we discuss something that moms and dads, grandparents and caregivers, if you haven't heard about, then just go check on your children after this broadcast is over, and I promise they will enlighten you, because our subject today is 13 Reasons Why. Whether we're talking about the book by that title or the Netflix series by that title, it is everywhere these days. Young people are all over it because it is about them. Many of them see themselves in the characters portrayed, and so that prompted us to do this broadcast and dedicate it to 13 Reasons Why, because it's not just any subject matter for children. This deals with suicide in a very blunt, in-your-face way. We want to show you a clip just to give you a feel for what the Netflix series looks like, but we also want to let you know that we're going to cover not only the show and the book and how they're impacting our young people, but the power that words have and the power that words had on the main character in 13 Reasons Why. And then, of course, some advice that we can use moving forward, how you can start the conversation with your children when it comes to sensitive subjects like suicide, how you can keep your finger on their pulse, if you will, and make sure that their life is on the right track, and what to do if it's not. And we have a child and adolescent psychiatrist, our friend from the Medical College of Georgia at Augusta University, Dr. Dale Peeples, to walk us down that road. But first, a quick look at 13 Reasons Why. This is from the Netflix series.
We do not have a problem with bullying.
Then why did that girl do it?
That girl's name is Hannah.
Mrs. Baker, it's so good to see you. We didn't know you'd be joining us.
Well, I'm still a member of the school community, right? And if you want to know why, I suggest you ask your own children. Or take a look at the walls of the restrooms that they use every day. Die. Die. These are the words carved on the walls of the bathrooms they use, and your kids did the carving.
13 Reasons Why is our topic all Means Report long. Dr. Dale Peeples, a familiar face to viewers of the Means Report and to members of our community. He's a child and adolescent psychiatrist at MCG at AU. Dr. Peeples, thanks for coming back.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks.
Well, you take us through some pretty tough issues, bullying most recently, and now suicide. Sometimes the two go hand in hand, sadly. You're using or have used the Netflix version of 13 Reasons Why in your work. Tell us about that.
That's true. I haven't used it now with patients,
right,
but the context we do use it in is with our trainees, our residents who are becoming psychiatrists. We use it to better illustrate aspects around suicide, the impact that it can have.
The themes that come up in that series and in the book, are they themes or topics that you've seen a lot in your practice, in your work with children?
Right. So, as viewers may be aware that, in addition to the suicide, the show also touches on sexual assault, it touches on bullying, and those definitely are issues that some of my patients deal with.
Now, just to recap, the story is about the main character, Hannah. Hannah commits suicide, and before she does, she makes several tapes that she distributes to the people who she thinks, good and bad, played a role in her life, in particular played a role in her decision to end her life. And so let's move from getting your future colleagues to watch this as they prepare to go into the field of psychiatry to how we should deal with these topics. And I guess the main question is, it sounds like a stupid question asking it now that I'm about to pose it, but is suicide ever the right response or an acceptable response to anything you're dealing with in life?
It's a problem that we can always work around. Suicide or thoughts about suicide are very common in teenagers. About a third of high school students in any given year may have very fleeting, very temporary thoughts about suicide. And imagine if all those kids acted on them. It would be an unimaginable loss. There's always a solution, and it's just sitting down and figuring out the workaround. There's no reason to ever use suicide as the only option.
All right, so how do we know when a child is serious? When you get past the typical adolescent angst and you start to say, wait a minute, this kid's crossed the line, they may do something.
Mm-hmm. Right, so depression is a huge risk factor for suicide. So, the more and more symptoms of depression we're seeing in a kid, the more we're going to worry that they may actually act on those impulses. And when we talk about depression, we're talking about, obviously, depressed mood, feeling sad and feeling down. But some kids will describe the sense of anger and irritability instead of sadness. So any changes like that in the emotion that a family's seeing in their kids should be warning signs. Withdrawing from activities that a child used to enjoy, changes in sleeping patterns, changes in eating patterns, decline in academic performance, those are going to be warning signs to a family as well that something's wrong here.
Well, and at that point, do you just start the conversation with them and try to get them back to a happy place, to oversimplify it, or do we seek professional help? How do you know when to make that move?
That can be a little tricky to figure out, and the teenager in question can be a good source for families. If parents are talking to their child and their child really feels like that this is getting out of control, this is something they can't handle, then yes, you immediately want to seek professional help. But sometimes there are issues that a family can work through on their own. You want to think about the severity of the thoughts. I mentioned a number of kids will have thoughts about life's not worth living, wishing they were dead. When you start thinking about ways you might hurt yourself, we worry a lot more. When you start making a concrete plan, you're giving away possessions, that's extremely worrisome.
We saw the main character do that in the book and in the series. How many, you don't have to give a number, but generally speaking, do a lot of kids who come in as your patients want help, or do they feel that their parents forced them to be in that chair across from you?
Yeah, it's a good question. There are both cases. There are certain situations where a child's really not acknowledging the problem, but the parents see that it's there evidently. Most kids I see, do want help and are looking to change things. And usually after a child has gotten a chance to know you, you're no longer this stranger that's kind of asking these personal, intimate questions about their life. Generally speaking, they come on board with treatment and they're looking to fix the situation with you.
We talked about this with, I believe, smoking and violence, and I think sex, and the topic was when you see those things glamorized on the big screen, or in this case, the small screen television, does it make you want to do that? Are you worried that 13 Reasons Why may make suicide glamorous?
Yeah, that's a huge worry with this, and my advice to families is if you feel like your child is at risk, they've had trouble with depression, they've had trouble with self-harm, this is not good entertainment for them. You're probably aware that suicide has a contagion effect, meaning that if we see a suicide in a community, you're likely to see other suicides follow it. And this series in particular does add an extra layer of glamour to it. The main character, she's able to continue to narrate the story after she's died. She's still having a direct impact on the lives of others. There's sort of a cosmic justice carried out through her actions, and none of those really happen with true suicide. So, it gives kids this fantasy picture.
How powerful are other people's words and actions when it comes to pushing someone to the point of suicidal thoughts? The reason I ask is because, at the risk of sounding insensitive, there were many times when I read the book that I thought, this girl is going through what every high schooler goes through. How dare she think this is worthy of ending her life? And so, again, I say, can you be bullied or put down to the point of, I want to end it?
Yeah. So, every year or so, there's going to be a big case in the news about suicide linked to bullying. We've seen it in the past. But suicide never has just one cause. There's never just one factor. Oftentimes there are underlying mental health issues, depression being the most common, but sometimes substance use issues as well, that kind of lay the groundwork for a suicide. And then, certainly life stressors can factor in, whether it's issues at home or issues at school with friends, poor academic performance. All those can be a contributor, but usually you can't just identify one cause.
What about the role of the guidance counselor, in schools? Do you think that they are qualified enough and doing enough to help these children? Sometimes those are the folks that see them way before you do.
Yeah, and that was another concern I had about the series. The guidance counselor really wasn't very helpful.
Not helpful, not really good at his job.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, and the reality is, again, thoughts about suicide are extremely common in teenagers, and guidance counselors are prepared for this. They do know how to help an individual seek further assistance. Again, sometimes they might be able to work with the child or with the family on their own and manage a situation, but at the very least, they'll put you in touch with crisis services.
Does it run in the family, the thoughts of suicide? If mom or dad or a grandparent or a relative committed suicide, are you more likely to try?
Yeah, so family history is a risk factor with suicide. One, oftentimes there were the issues of depression that really led to the first suicide, and we know that that's very heritable. So, parents with depression, it's likely that a child could have depression as well too. And then you also, can have that contagion effect we discussed earlier, where this suicide has been modeled for the child. They've had a close family member commit suicide. They've seen how it was carried out, and then they follow a similar course.
When the Means Report continues, we're going to continue our conversation about teen suicide based on this phenomenon of 13 reasons why. We want to talk to Dr. Peeples about the treatment options that are available. If you have a young person in your life who has maybe some of the signs or symptoms that the doctor has already outlined and you want to take that first step, we'll tell you what to expect if you walk into a psychiatrist's office and what happens from there. And a little bit later in the broadcast, we will let you know how you can get some help, some resources that are available right now for you just from the comfort of your own home on your tablet or your computer or your smartphone, so you don't have to wait until all the offices open on Monday as the Means Report continues.